All right, it is time for Friday Feedback, where we look at feedback from people in the audience, the most important people. If it weren't for you, I'd be a guy in a room with a microphone talking to nobody, probably this room with this microphone, and that would be a very, very sad thing. But fortunately, there are people out there. You can email info@davidpakman.com or leave a comment on any of our various platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchats, etc. Substack, all of them. Spotify. Let's go first to Nancy. Nancy very powerfully defends Donald Trump by saying gas is down, the stock market is surging. Thank you, President Trump. Well, couple problems. Gas isn't down. When Trump took over, gas was about 305 a gallon, and gas is at 304 a gallon. It was just at 310 a gallon recently. So gas isn't down. And anyway, gas has very little to do with presidents, as I've said, no matter what the president's party is. The stock market is surging. The stock market has been doing well, which I love. I am glad to admit that, although it is increasingly shaky lately. It's just important to remember that the stock market as an indicator of how the economy is doing is not super accurate. Most people own no or relatively few shares of stock, and that is an indicator that is heavily, heavily weighted towards the rich. So I don't know what point Nancy was trying to make. I guess that the economy is awesome, but I don't know that gas prices being flat and stocks being slightly up really make that case. Mamo Pamela says, what other word would you use for the food you buy in a store? Yeah, Trump does this thing where he acts like groceries is some kind of, sophisticated and rarely used word. He says often things like groceries. Whoever even heard that word? That's what people say. It's food that you buy unprepared, usually in a store, is called groceries. And what Trump often means by that's a really, really beautiful and interesting word. Often what he means is this is a word I only recently learned. And you can't fault the guy, right? I mean, he didn't exactly grow up in a situation where he has to worry about obtaining groceries, AKA unprepared food that you buy in a grocery store. So it's not a surprise to me that it's not a word he was familiar with. Over on the subreddit, the user Yes For Me Too wrote, the Democrats in the House of Representatives should call for an impeachment vote every day, since Democrats lack majorities in any branch of government and cannot invoke the 25th Amendment. Why not call for impeachment daily? Each call could detail constitutional violations, credible allegations of sexual misconduct with minors, unauthorized alterations to White House property, sending troops to Democrat cities, withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, and tariff policies that have devastated soybean exports to China and harmed American farmers. At least it will show a willingness from the Democrats to fight for the USA instead of just agreeing to whatever lesser evil the Republicans want to pass. Yeah, I kind of think this would be sort of pointless. I mean, first of all, not all of these are impeachable offenses. Credible allegations of sexual misconduct with minors. Those allegations are not from when Donald Trump was president. I know that doesn't make him any better of a person, but those aren't from when he was president. Unauthorized alterations to White House property. I just don't know that that's impeachable. It's not a high crime or misdemeanor. Sending troops to Democrat cities. Okay, that actually may be a constitutional violation. I think that's the strongest one here. Withdrawing from the Paris Agreement or tariff policies, I just don't think are impeachable offenses. And I think Trump's done a lot of impeachable stuff. So I think that if Democrats every day just started trying to impeach Trump, I don't know. Obviously, it wouldn't work. And I know that the person saying that it wouldn't work. I don't even know that the optics or the PR benefit would be that useful. I don't know that I need Democrats doing that. But I'm more than glad to hear from people in the audience if that's something you would like them to do. Jessica Quill commented on Facebook, I have a theory that now Jessica is referring to how 60 Minutes edited the interview with Trump. Jessica says, I have a theory that this was part of the settlement between CBS and Trump, an interview of Trump that is favorable to Trump, edited to make him look better. Knowing everything that we know about Trump, that would not shock me morally or ethically, but we don't have any evidence that that's what it was. I believe that the simplest explanation is probably the right one in this case, which is CBS is now self-censoring because they don't want more legal problems. And so they cut stuff out that Trump wanted cut out and that they realized would make him look better to remove. I think it's that simple. I don't think the whole point of self-censorship in authoritarian environments is they don't have to be told to do it. And that's what makes it so insidious and also powerful. Jitka Kucherova says Trump's right eye. What about his right ear? Yeah, I'm going to admit, I haven't looked deeply into the claims about Trump's right ear. Now, if you haven't heard the claims, what this is about is that there are those who say if Trump really had been grazed by a bullet, his right ear wouldn't look the way it looks. You would still be able to see evidence of when Trump was grazed by that bullet. And this has led some to say he wasn't really hit by a bullet, others to raise other kind of conspiratorial ideas. I've seen pictures of Trump's right ear where it does look completely healed in a way that I guess is weird for a guy his age and, given what it looked like, supposedly. I've also seen pictures where I think I can kind of see an area that looks discolored as a result of it. I just don't know. I think that there's a lot of other hijinks and mishigas going on with Donald Trump that is related to his lies, excuse me, and also related to his health, that I have not deeply looked into the claims about Trump's right ear, but maybe some of you have and you want to weigh in. Amy Hesselson-Lowe says about Kash Patel's country music singing girlfriend, if she's a country music sensation, why didn't she fly him? Yeah, I like this comment because in his defense of flying her around on government jets, Kash Patel referred to his girlfriend as a country music sensation. Now, I don't pretend to be an expert on country music. I'm Jewish after all. That's one of those like half jokes. I don't pretend to be an expert on country music, but it is true that the sensations in the music world, they usually have their private plane travel. So why would she need to be flown around by Kash? It's a fair question. It's a completely fair question and one that I appreciate. Okay, Life Caterpillar on the subreddit weighed in on the passing of Dick Cheney and said Cheney and Trump are both horrible. It's not a contest. Watch for anybody insisting Cheney was worse. The motivation behind doing that is unhelpful and even suspicious at best. The most charitable motivation for doing so would be that it's an attempt to establish some political commentary bona fides on social media. Like I've been paying attention to politics since before Trump. Simply knowing who Cheney was and that he was bad is not impressive or important. A less charitable motivating factor explanation is that it whitewashes the unique horribleness that is Trump. Don't buy into any of it. People can be horrible in different ways and for different reasons. Dick Cheney was part of an administration that went into Iraq on faulty intelligence, and it led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of civilians, depending on what information you accept. Subsequently participated in one of the greatest expansions of the security state and the surveillance state that we have seen on the basis of we need to do it because of 9/11, and shot his friend in the face, although it was an accident. I'm only jokingly kind of including that element of it. And he was right there as George W. Bush did these things. Now, vice presidents don't make policy, but they can advise. Ultimately, I believe the buck stops with George W. Bush. And then later in his life, Dick Cheney did recognize that partisanship aside, Donald Trump doesn't even meet the most basic requirements for what should be a president of the United States. And so he said, Trump is no good. And for that, I agree that he was right about that. Trump's different in a completely different way. So for me, it's not about, the gamesmanship about Cheney was worse than Trump or not as bad. And the point is to whitewash Trump or make him look worse. People can be good or bad in terms of the policies they support, independent of any other comparisons, and different from how others are and they work. Cheney was bad for a certain set of reasons. Trump is bad for other reasons. And I don't really know that we have to equate different ways of failing with decades between them. The world is a different place. Trump is a different political beast. And that's the way I would leave it. Dryhold said on the subreddit about Pakman's milquetoast Mamdani interview. I'm a longtime listener and paying member of the David Pakman Show. And as a democratic socialist, I can deal with my disagreements with Pakman's adherence to capitalism as a viable economic structure for solving problems and distributing resources. Pakman keeps his economic worldview tethered to the empirical, which is certainly understandable. But it's also quite limiting and resistant to alternatives. His interview with Zoran Mamdani was a moment Pakman could have learned something about what it means and looks like to be a leftist outside of a capitalist economic system. As any leftist knows, capitalism is a never-ending contradiction. For as much wealth as it creates, it manifests extreme poverty and income inequality. Capitalism's endless drive for profit and growth is contradicted by the lived time of our bodies, minds, our environment. The earth cannot metabolize the pace of capitalism's endless drive for material extraction. What I'm getting at is Pakman chose to spend his time asking questions that virtually every other skeptical pundit or journalist have asked him already. There was no, tell me why my capitalist progressive position is wrong or short-sighted. There was no, tell about why your universal politics are needed in this historical moment. Disappointing all around. Yeah, listen, there were people who disliked my Mamdani interview because I was too critical. There were people who disliked my Mamdani interview because I was not critical enough. There were people who disliked it because I did it too late in the game, even though we asked him to be on a while ago and we heard back on the Sunday night before the election and we got him on within 12 hours. I couldn't control it. We tried to get him on. We weren't able to until last Monday. The reality here is, first of all, this person is wrong on the facts and says that capitalism manifests extreme poverty and income inequality. Countries with the highest standard of living, lower income inequality than the United States, and significantly lower poverty are capitalist countries. Now, they are a certain type of capitalism. It's called social democracy. This is a well-regulated form of capitalism that uses taxation in a capitalist system to ensure people's standards of living don't go too low by taxing the very rich. In studying the economic systems that we have seen over the last several hundred years, the conclusion I've come to on an empirical basis is that the best outcomes are happening in social democracies. Social democracy is capitalism. So I think this person is wrong on the facts. As far as what I should have asked about the interview, during the interview, a lot of people are unhappy with me for different reasons, and they directly conflict with each other. I always do the interview I want to do, and I ask what I want to ask. I'm not super interested when interviewing someone who's going to be the administrator of a city. I'm not that interested in spending the time getting his philosophical views about a system he will never be able to implement. I'm more interested in figuring out, here's specific policies you want to put in place. How are those going to work? And so that's what I decided to focus on. There are other interviews that have been done with him, I'm sure, and they focused in other areas. And there's probably a little something for everyone out there if you're looking for a specific type of interview with Zoran Mamdani. We continue donating the first payment for every new membership at joinpakman.com and on my Substack to the charity Feeding America. There is hunger in the country. It's embarrassing and terrifying and humiliating that as a rich country, we still have people who are hungry, but we do. We're doing what we can. We are into the 5 figures fundraised, and you can get any kind of membership, monthly or yearly, website or Substack. Your first payment in November will be donated to the charity Feeding America. We'll see you on the bonus show. Thanks for watching. Check out another one of our videos and make sure to subscribe so YouTube keeps our content in your feed. And if you prefer audio, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple.